Incredible moment, mute billionaire's hidden world revealed by a touching sign language encounter. Ethan Harris looked down at the meticulously curated art supplies he had bought for the children's reading program, the crumpled paper bags feeling heavy in his hands. A muted atmosphere of laughter and bright chatter filled the local library, a stark contrast to the echoing silence of his own life. He stepped inside, his heart racing at the thought of mingling with the community he had long felt distant from. Here he was, a self-made billionaire wrapped in wealth yet bound by silence. He didn't belong, and his stomach tightened at the prospect of exposure. Would they see the man behind the money or merely the mute eccentric? The question clawed at him, souring the excitement of giving. As laughter swirled around him, Ethan felt a suffocating solitude. Family gatherings were nightmares of forced politeness and vacuous conversation, places where he shuffled through interactions like a ghost, visible but untouchable. The warmth and camaraderie in the library reminded him of the connections he craved but could not voice, like a desperate artist gazing at a blank canvas with only muted colors at his disposal. The thought stung. He thought he had everything, yet solitude permeated every corner of his lavish mansion. It was a gilded cage, and he was its unwilling prisoner. Before he could turn back, her presence lit up the room. Mia, a woman adorned in passion and purpose, approached him with a spark in her eyes that pierced through to his longing heart. She introduced herself using sign language, her gestures flowing fluidly. For a moment, the world blurred as he realized he could understand her. No judgment. No pity. Just raw honesty. The heaviness in his chest began to dissolve as if she had breathed life into the stagnant air around him. They began to communicate with ease, conversations bursting forth like colored paints onto a blank canvas. But soon, doubts clouded the vibrant moment. Mia was a single mother, her ambitions battling fiercely against the weight of responsibility. He could sense the flickers of inadequacy that flared in her eyes, reflected back at him like dimming stars. In her presence, he oscillated between hope and despair. Their friendship felt like balancing on a tightrope suspended over a chasm of unspoken fears. The truth hit him like a cold wave. Could he truly reach out to her without dragging her into the mire of his fears? Was he capable of offering more than just his wealth? Ethan's palms grew clammy as he prepared for the community showcase. He could feel the heavy scrutiny of an audience who might only see him as the mute billionaire, a label that had pinned him down for far too long. His hand trembled slightly as he contemplated revealing the emotions bottled up inside, the thoughts that churned in his mind like a raging storm. Would anyone hear him for who he truly was, or would he be forever trapped in the silence imposed by societal expectations? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. All the while, Mia's encouraging smile settled in the corner of his mind, pulling him forward yet tightening chains of anxiety around his heart. How could his truth resonate with them when even he struggled against the inertia of his own life? For one fleeting moment, he felt the electric thrill of possibility sparking within, but then dread washed over him like icy water. What if his story fell flat? What if he revealed too much and made himself vulnerable to the very judgments he wanted to escape? With every step toward the podium, Ethan could feel every doubt intertwining, squeezing around his throat like a vice. He raised his eyes to meet Mia's, the unwavering belief shining back sent him spiraling into both dread and exhilaration. As he prepared to voice the words that had never passed his lips, he felt the subtle threat of silence looming in the air, waiting to engulf him once more. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the heaviness of expectation settle over him like a thick fog. The crowd before him blurred into an indistinct mass as the roar of his internal doubts filled his mind. With each heartbeat, he reminded himself of his purpose, a small flicker of resolve rooted in the simplicity of his contribution. He wasn't just there to share his wealth, he wanted to share his experience, his struggles, and perhaps inspire others to shed the confines of silence. The podium loomed closer, each step echoing within the cavernous silence of his thoughts. Ethan's gaze darted to Mia, who stood a few feet away, her encouragement radiating through that supportive aura. If anyone could help him break through the barriers he had built, it was her. Yet the voices of his past filled his ears, snippets of conversations laden with judgment and misunderstanding. As a child, he had been told to be grateful for what he had, to smile and blend in with the wealthy but often dismissive crowd. But here, before this audience, he could redefine gratitude. The thought solidified into a plan, a mental blueprint. Instead of focusing on how others perceived him, he resolved to be raw and honest. He wanted to expose the layers of his life to this community, not for sympathy, but for understanding. He would peel back the masks of his fortune to convey the loneliness and frustration he'd faced, experiences that mirrored those in the audience. As he positioned himself at the microphone, his heart pounded like a drum inside his chest. The initial tremor in his hands faded as he began to sign and speak, each word rising from the depths of his solitude. "I am Ethan," he started, a burst of warmth igniting in his chest. "I am not just a billionaire." The words flowed, mixing his truth with the vulnerability he had avoided throughout his life. He recounted moments where his wealth felt like chains rather than wings. With every sentence, he felt a synchronized release of emotions, the laughter, the sorrow, the regret pouring forth in colorful imagery that came alive in the exchange. He shared stories of family gatherings filled with hollow discussions and societal expectations. Mia's eyes, wide and encouraged, urged him on. The world around him began to dissolve, and he felt the audience lean in, a collective breath held as they absorbed his journey of isolation, their eyes flickering with recognition. Was it possible? Could they see through the facade he'd constructed to cast the light of his reality? Perhaps they, too, felt unseen, lost in their own battles. The moment of sharing birthed a revelation within him. This connection, underpinned by vulnerability, transcended his fears. He realized he possessed a voice after all, not just to utter words but to convey feelings, experiences, and even discomfort. He had something to offer that went beyond financial support, a testament to resilience and the shared struggle of human existence. As he concluded, the audience erupted into applause, not just for his contribution, but for the candor with which he had approached them. The sound reverberated within him, filling the empty spaces he had come to know so well. But then, between the adrenaline of his exposed self and the spark of encouragement from others, another thought arose: now what? He felt the slipping grip of his past tighten again around his thoughts. How would he maintain this newfound connection? Could he transform this moment into sustained growth, not only for himself but also for others seeking authenticity? From the front row, Mia's gaze caught his again, her own expression laden with intensity. The maelstrom of possibilities washed over him, but would he be able to navigate the waters of self-discovery without drowning in the depths of anxiety and expectation? Ethan stepped down from the podium, heart still racing with the aftershocks of his revelations. Applause echoed behind him, a sound both foreign and intoxicating as it reverberated through his body. He felt a strange mix of exhilaration and trepidation, awareness pressing on him as the thrill of vulnerability faded into the stark reality of what lay ahead. Mia approached with an infectious smile, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You were amazing," she said, reaching out for his hand, squeezing it tightly. In that moment, he couldn't help but wonder if she saw the same mixture of conflicting emotions swirling inside him. He smiled back, but the weight of uncertainty rumbled on the surface of his mind. What did maintaining this connection truly mean? Words echoing in his head, would they grow stale, or worse, disappear? Mia sensed his conflict. "Let us take a walk," she suggested, leading him away from the lingering crowd. The fresh air outside felt electric, as Ethan inhaled deeply, attempting to ground himself. In solitude, he often found solace, but with Mia by his side, a new sense of camaraderie blossomed, a spark ignited within him that yearned for more. "Your story matters," she said gently, breaking the silence that enveloped them. "You've got to nurture this openness. There is so much potential here." He nodded, but unease gnawed at him. This was a turning point, yes, but he felt its gravity pulling him in disparate directions. But where do I begin? Sharing once feels easy, finding ways to keep that dialogue alive. That seems daunting. His voice faltered, thick with apprehension. Mia's expression shifted, revealing a seriousness that demanded his attention. Ethan, it's not just about public speaking. It's about digging deeper into your experiences, turning your challenges into actionable goals. As she spoke, he considered her words carefully. Could he commit to this journey of exploration, one that required confronting corners of his life he'd tried so hard to avoid? The terror of uncovering more truths loomed large. What layers of himself still lay hidden? What do you mean? He inquired, his curiosity piquing, intrigued by the idea of transforming past struggles into growth. This seemed dangerously liberating. Think about your isolation. What if you created spaces for others to share their experiences too? You've tapped into something powerful tonight, it needs to evolve into something sustainable. Her suggestion unraveled a new possibility in his mind, visions of gatherings, conversations full of empathy and growth, of breaking down barriers. But as excitement bubbled up within, it was quickly drowned by an ominous cloud of self-doubt. But I'm not a facilitator. Who am I to create safe spaces for vulnerability? You are someone who understands, she replied fiercely, and that's the first step. Use what you learned tonight. Ethan paused, her words forming cracks in his long-held beliefs. After years of donning a mask, could he truly step into this uncharted territory, not as a billionaire seeking approval but as someone who craved genuine connection? A lingering thought wrestled with him as they turned a corner. What hidden talents might emerge with this exploration? Perhaps he could share the struggles of wealth, a microphone for the unspoken challenges of those like him. A sudden realization flickered a faint glimmer of potential, obscured by years of self-doubt. But with this revelation came an unsettling echo, the fear of tipping into inadequacy, waiting just beneath the surface like a shadow. Could he truly guide others while grappling with his own unhealed wounds? Mia's laughter pulled him from his internal negotiations. You're shutting yourself down again, aren't you? Caught off guard, Ethan was struck by the truth of her observation. Was he already retreating to safety before fully embracing this newfound mission? In that moment, a choice loomed before him, one long overdue: confront past fears, or allow them to dictate his future. The fork in the road called out, and he knew where he had to start. Before the dawn of a new path could unfold, he needed to brave those shadows first. As they walked silently, the world around him blurring into a haze of uncertainty, a new question emerged: if he dared step into the light, was he prepared for the challenges that awaited? The decision was imminent, and he could feel the weight of his next steps bearing down on his shoulders more than ever. Ethan adjusted his grip on the sidewalk railing, the cool metal anchoring him as the chatter of the outside world faded into a low hum. He felt a growing awareness of his footfalls as he and Mia walked further from the podium, her energy transforming the daunting prospect of his new path into something almost tangible. He couldn't dismiss the feeling that she was guiding him toward a precipice, one that promised both fulfillment and exposure. What would those first steps look like? Have you ever thought about why you've hesitated to share beyond the initial moment? Mia's voice was steady, yet it dripped with understanding. Ethan shot her a sidelong glance. Her straightforward question seemed to peel away the layers he had built around his thoughts. I guess I feared the judgments, how people might interpret my vulnerability. The judgments of people who don't know you? She probed, her eyes searching his. He hesitated, contemplating. Maybe it's deeper than that. I've always expected myself to maintain a certain image, to be defined by my success, not my struggles. Why don't you redefine that? Mia suggested. You have the opportunity to turn your struggles into strengths. What if your next step is to lean into the discomfort? The push she gave felt like a shove into icy waters. Part of him wanted to retreat, to return to the familiarity of success and the protective walls of his persona. But a smaller part, a whispering impulse, perhaps longed for transformation. What would it mean to be vulnerable and still succeed? As they continued walking, Ethan's mind began to race with scenarios. What if he shared his experience of isolation, his past encounters with wealth, confidence, and fear? But could he strip away the protective armor of status for the sake of connection? He stopped suddenly, causing Mia to turn to face him. "What if I fail?" he said, the fear spilling unabashedly from his lips. "What if I'm not relatable? What if I dive into this, and it all backfires? What if it doesn't?" Mia countered, crossing her arms as she met his gaze. "Look at what you've done already. You've faced the crowd, and they responded to your truth. That is relatable." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair, contemplating her words. She was right. Standing on that podium had been the first step. His truth had resonated with at least some. Could that same truth resonate on a more intimate scale, help others find their voices? But how do I even begin? He wondered aloud, eyeing her as if she held the roadmap to his burgeoning endeavor. "Well, start small," she advised. "Maybe host a gathering with a few trusted friends or colleagues. Let it be an open dialogue, one where everyone shares their story. You wouldn't be facilitating necessarily, it could just be a space you create." The idea took root in his mind, heavy but exciting, blossoming like the green in a park after a long winter. He envisioned a room filled with faces, some familiar, some not, each contributing a story that echoed his own struggles. Wouldn't that feel cathartic, not just for him but for them too? Yet, with every vision of that gathering came a dark shadow, one of inadequacy and imposter syndrome. What right did he have to curate their truths? Mia appeared to read his thoughts again. "You already have the understanding, Ethan. You've lived it. Don't let fear taint the opportunity. True leadership is born from shared vulnerability." As he absorbed her words, a flicker of determination sparked deep within. Instead of running from the shadows of his past, what if he turned to face them, daring to illuminate their corners with authenticity? The idea surged through him, resonating deeply, a calling he had not fully acknowledged until now. But there loomed another question: was the desire to connect strong enough to eclipse the fears tied to his past? Could he truly anchor this new venture in the authenticity Mia encouraged? Before he could articulate his swirling thoughts, Mia waved her hand through the air, the movement a prompt for him to react. "Look, Ethan, whatever you decide, it's part of your journey. You can't control how others will respond, but you can control your willingness to explore this." A resolve began to stitch itself into his mind, yet doubts festered, refusing to fade entirely. Soon, he would be at a crossroads once more, where the internal struggle of his past would confront the unfolding possibilities of his future. Just as he imagined those first tentative conversations he might begin, everything slowed. The upcoming gathering took on a weight he hadn't expected. What he feared the most didn't just live in his past, it loomed large in the reflections of his future. Feeling a need for clarity, he turned to Mia. "What if this turns out to be more than just a small gathering? What if it expands?" As her grin widened, Ethan took a deep breath. Clarity or chaos, either way, it was all about to unfold. And with that, he was left to ponder what discoveries lay ahead as he prepared to confront not just his past, but the potential of becoming a beacon for others on their journeys. Ethan stood under the soft glow of streetlights as the evening set in, the vibrant hum of the city around him acting as a backdrop to his growing inner turmoil. Thoughts raced through his mind, each one more daunting than the last. The prospect of gathering a small group of people to share their vulnerabilities felt as appealing as it was terrifying. Would he, a man molded by achievement, be able to forge a realm of honesty and connection? He recalled Mia's challenge to lean into discomfort. Could embracing vulnerability forge a new path? Perhaps this gathering could be a sanctuary where masks were discarded, revealing shared humanity and intimate confession of imperfections. Yet, that thought flickered and faded under the heavier weight of his fears. Would others view him as an imposter masquerading as a facilitator? He had nearly convinced himself to back down when his phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, an intrusion on his spiral of doubt. He fished it out, noting a message from Mia. "Hey, have you decided on a date yet?" The words, simple and light, prodded at the corners of his resolve. Determined to move beyond indecision, he typed quickly, "Let's aim for next week." Sending it felt like launching an arrow into an unknown future, one aimed at the heart of his insecurities. As days passed, he busied himself with logistics and preparations, each small task an exercise in grounding his vision. He decorated the space, comfortable yet unpretentious, the walls adorned with art that spoke of personal journeys. He imagined the air a mix of anticipation and anxiety, rich with stories waiting to unfold. However, self-doubt continued to loom over his preparations like dark clouds before a storm. Each moment of excitement was punctured by a whisper, asking, "Who do you think you are?" When he looked in the mirror, he saw more than a confident man, he saw a kaleidoscope of identity, watching pieces of his past collide with an image he barely recognized. At night, he found himself pacing his apartment, anxiety flaring, swirling around his head like a tempest. What if they didn't connect? What if his own story fell flat among others' painful truths? What if he was wholly unprepared to lead this venture? Amidst these thoughts, Ethan began to research ways to navigate discussions around vulnerability. He immersed himself in articles, podcasts, and books, each resource a tool, every notion a foundation brick in the building of something substantial. He discovered techniques for creating safe spaces, mindful listening, and the importance of empathy. Yet a gnawing voice persisted, insisting that no amount of preparation could shield him from judgment. On the day of the gathering, Ethan felt an electric tension coursing through his veins, a mixture of nausea and exhilaration. He arrived early, the room alive in a glow of preparation. When he glanced around, he saw potential familiar faces intermingled with those bearing expressions of curiosity and trepidation. The evening light tempered by the curtains offered a comforting embrace, as though the space itself conspired to keep secrets safe. As the guests began to arrive, he smiled and greeted each person, masking his own tumult within a veneer of composure. Slowly, he welcomed everyone, directing them toward the circle of chairs he had arranged, each seat an invitation to share in whatever they felt comfortable expressing. He caught Mia's encouraging nod in the corner. Gathering himself, he took a moment to breathe deeply, attempting to quell the tempest inside. "Thank you for coming. Tonight, this is a space for us to share stories, to listen, and to connect. No judgment, only understanding." The words felt heavy, earnest, resonating within the room. As he spoke, a surprising calm enveloped him, anchoring his thoughts and fears. He realized then that failure was no longer his primary concern. The focus shifted to fostering a genuine connection, exploring each layer of shared experiences. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of vulnerability and strength. This gathering was a paradox, a space for discomfort that birthed intimacy through the recognition of shared faults, fears, and resilience. As the first few stories unfolded, a warmth filled the room, wrapping around him like a soft blanket. Laughter mingled with murmurs of empathy, nods of understanding transformed faces. This was it, the authentic engagement he sought. But amid the unfolding revelations, Ethan sensed an underlying current tugging at the meeting. The stories revealed complexities that mirrored his own struggles. He wondered if the threads connecting their narratives would weave together an unexpected tapestry of shared strength. Then, a thought erupted within him: what if he wasn't merely leading this conversation but stepping into a deeper awareness of his own role, catalyzing not just their journeys but his own exploration of self? And as he sat there, listening and absorbing, another thought crept in. What awaited him after they all left? Would he be able to sustain the momentum of this connection beyond the evening? In that moment, seated amidst new allies on their shared paths, he felt fragile yet invincible, confronted with the challenge of not just listening to these stories but integrating these experiences into a greater understanding of his own identity. What awaited him as he stepped past the threshold of this gathering? Could the revelations that emerged from shared stories ignite a future he hadn't yet envisioned, one filled with the realities of others as well as himself? Ethan sat in the soft glow of a dim light, still reeling from the energy of the gathering that had just wrapped up. The clattering of chairs and the murmurs of departing guests faded, leaving behind a lingering warmth that enveloped him like a protective shield. Each story shared, rich with personal struggle and triumph, sat with him, heavy yet enlightening. It was a tapestry he desperately wanted to understand, the intertwined lives illuminating parts of himself he hadn't known existed. As Mia lingered, helping him collect the empty coffee cups scattered around, Ethan glanced at her, momentarily lost in thought. "Did you see their faces when the stories began flowing?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. He nodded, surprised at how easy the connection had become, a stark contrast to the anxiety that had threatened to paralyze him before the gathering. Yet, beneath the surface joy, another thought burrowed its way into his mind. What had he truly learned about himself? Despite the revelations from others, he felt a detachment, a subtle barrier. Could he really bridge the gap between the joy of connection and the lingering fear of inadequacy? That night, when he finally settled into bed, sleep eluded him. Thoughts tumbled chaotically, wrestling with one another. The faces of his guests flashed in his mind, and he recalled their stories with stark clarity. There was Greg, whose vulnerability about losing a job sent ripples of empathy through the circle, and Jenna, whose recounting of her estranged relationship with her mother had brought tears to their eyes. Each narrative was a testament to strength hidden beneath layers of fear and loss. But what was his story compared to theirs? He wrestled with the idea that perhaps his life, marked by achievements and accolades, lacked the depth he sought to convey. Who was he, really, in the face of such raw human experiences? Determination kicked in as dawn approached. Instead of succumbing to despair, he made a choice: he would excavate the stories buried deep within himself. He rose early, the sun barely breaking through the horizon, and grabbed a journal he had stowed away. Each word he penned spoke not of triumph but of the emotions he rarely allowed himself to express: moments of vulnerability, doubt, and misunderstanding. The act of writing became cathartic. He explored his childhood insecurities, examined failed relationships, and confronted the gnawing fear of being seen as an imposter. His thoughts began to shift, revealing a surprising truth: vulnerability, he realized, wasn't a weakness but a strength. Acknowledging his own flaws would only deepen the connection he craved. Ethan felt as if he was peeling back layers of himself, step by step. With every revelation, he grappled with the fear that flooded back in, but he also felt exhilarated by the possibility of uncovering hidden traits he had previously shrouded in silence. He could hear the echoes of the gathering in his mind, the laughter, the understanding, and it urged him forward. However, just as clarity began to dawn, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Greg. "Hey, Ethan. Can we talk? I have something important to share with you." An unsettling flutter stirred in his stomach. What could it be? Was Greg's story woven with the same strength and vulnerability that had been shared that night, or was it a reflection of something more dire? Anxiety gripped Ethan once more. It was time to confront understanding in both himself and others. As he prepared to respond, he felt a resolve tightening within him. Perhaps there was more to uncover than merely sharing stories. Maybe they needed to elevate their connection into something that transcended the weight of their experiences. Would he be able to take this fledgling sense of community further, transforming it into a force for real growth, or could it all collapse under the pressure of expectations? The stakes had been raised, and now there was no turning back. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the message from Greg, the shadows of uncertainty hanging heavily in the air. There was a part of him that wanted to bury himself in the comfort of introspection, to delve deeper into his newly discovered vulnerabilities. But another part craved human connection, a chance to bridge the chasm of his solitude with the shared experiences of others. He grabbed his phone, the screen lit up halos of blue in the dim light, and typed a quick, reassuring response to Greg. "Sure, when and where?" As the conversation continued, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that today would leave an indelible mark on his journey. After sending his message, he paced the room, restlessly chewing over the implications of Greg's call. Would this be just another exchange of words, or would it open a door to deeper understanding? Movement suddenly pulled Ethan from his thoughts as he caught a glimpse of his own reflection in the mirror. A stranger stared back, haunted eyes echoing the doubt pulsating through his heart. He was a man with achievements and enviable job, accolades piling high, but what good were they when his true self felt unresolved and untested? The decision loomed larger than ever, to face what lay ahead with courage or retreat into the abyss of familiar comfort. Ethan slowly pieced together threads of possibility. Could this encounter with Greg be a turning point, an opportunity for both of them? He realized he had a chance to help another, to also confront his fears in the process. Finally, the time came. Greg arrived, looking more somber than usual. "Hey, thanks for meeting me," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, an indication of the anxiety evident in his posture. "Of course," Ethan replied, motioning for Greg to take a seat. "What's on your mind?" The straightforwardness of his question hung between them, thickening the air with expectation. For a moment, Greg hesitated, casting his eyes downward as if the weight of his thoughts was too much to bear. Then, looking straight into Ethan's eyes, he began to unravel a tale filled with regret and uncertainty: his recent struggles for employment, the loss of connections he had once held dear, and the overwhelming sense of isolation that now haunted him. As Greg poured out his heart, Ethan found himself responding in real time. Each story sparked a reflection, illuminating the corners of his own neglected vulnerabilities. It struck him that vulnerability wasn't just a solitary burden; instead, it wrapped itself around their shared experience, amplifying every word they exchanged. The shift in both their energies was palpable. Ethan began to tailor his own narrative in response to Greg's revelations, the stories he had penned earlier now leaping vividly to life within him. He hesitated, a wave of fear threatening to wash away his resolve, but then he made a bold decision. "Greg, I relate more than you know. I've felt that same isolation, those doubts about being enough," Ethan confessed, his voice steady but his heart racing. This moment of honesty felt electric, intertwining their paths in unexpected ways. Greg's brows furrowed in surprise but then softened into a knowing expression. "You too?" he murmured, amazed. "I always thought." The sentence trailed off into a thick silence, the reality of their mutual vulnerability binding them in a profound way. As they continued to share, the layers of their pasts peeled back before each other, creating an atmosphere that felt rich with possibility and growth. But just as Ethan began to feel the fragile threads of a transformative connection between them, Greg's phone buzzed, catching him off guard. The sudden interruption sent a shiver through the moment, pulling them back to the realities that loomed beneath the surface. Greg glanced at the screen, his expression shifting, a mix of dread and anticipation. "What is it?" Ethan asked, feeling the anxiety build in his own chest. Greg hesitated again, and Ethan realized they were at a crossroads. This moment filled with unexpressed emotions could either solidify their bond or fracture it under the weight of unspoken truths. The time had come to face not just the stories, but the heart of what was holding them back. Would they embrace this new understanding or fall back into silence, leaving their vulnerabilities shackled once more? Ethan braced himself for whatever revelation would emerge next, unwilling to shy away from the truth that lay waiting just out of reach. Greg's gaze dropped to the phone, tension etched across his brow. Ethan could see a battle waging behind those eyes, a clash between the safe route of silence and the perilous path of honesty. "It's just an old friend," Greg finally said, but the lie felt like sandpaper against Ethan's heightened senses. "What if it's good news?" Ethan offered, trying to soothe the anxiety hanging thick in the air. His voice took on a hopeful lilt, masking his own uneasy heart. He craved regression to the openness they had just shared but sensed that Greg was on the edge of retreat. "It's not that simple," Greg replied, his tone defensive. "It's about a job I'm not sure I could take if it were offered." A moment suspended in uncertainty stretched between them, heavy and pregnant with implications. Ethan's mind raced. Wasn't this what they were here to unravel, the bonds of fear and limitations? What makes it not simple? Ethan tried again, his curiosity driving him to push past Greg's shields. "I had an interview last week, a rough one. I don't think I did well. I don't know if they'll even want to call me back, Greg muttered, almost to himself. The weight of his words slammed into Ethan made him remember sitting in the same uncomfortable chair not so long ago, engulfed in dread over a presentation that had gone horribly awry. Let's think about it another way, Ethan countered, leaning slightly forward. Instead of focusing on the potential rejection, what if you focus on what the job could mean for you? It's an opportunity. You have strengths, experiences that make you well suited for it. Just like you let it all out earlier with me, you owe it to yourself to be honest with them. Greg stared at him, his surprise shining through as though a new light was gradually illuminating a darkened room. You're really okay with the way I am right now? With how I feel? Of course, Ethan responded, feeling a swell of pride at his ability to connect. You're not the only one navigating the uncertainties of life, and I'm learning that those shadows hold the potential for growth. The shift between them felt transformative, charging the air with newfound potential. The thought that pushed through the layers of anxiety was that they could both progress through their fears together. Yet, doubt began creeping back into Greg's tone. What if I'm not cut out for that? What if I find out I'm not enough again? Ethan's heart echoed the question. He realized that despite his accomplishments, unease coursed through him because he secretly feared the same conclusion. What if you redefine enough? He suggested, his voice steady. The question lingered, charging the atmosphere with a collective taste of vulnerability, providing a moment of reflection. A delicate silence settled in, thick with contemplation. Greg's breathing slowed as he wrestled with the prospect of redefining his own self-imposed limitations. Ethan, you're really pushing me to think. Greg finally murmured, his tone softer, almost appreciative. And I have my own challenges to face too, remember? Ethan replied, his voice filled with sincerity. This mutual exchange had opened the doors to discovery not just of each other, but of themselves. With each moment spent together, barriers were crumbling. Greg looked up with a hint of determination lingering in his eyes. Maybe I will send a follow-up email. Just to check. Just to check. Ethan echoed, smiling. You could make it more than that. Do you want to learn to negotiate for what you want? Yeah. I think I want to. Good. The proud sense of connection reinforced Ethan's resolve. Yet, underneath, a tremor of dread emerged as he recognized his own fear of doing the same in his professional life. Suddenly, he was struck by how intertwined their journeys had become, each breakthrough illuminated the underlying silence blocking his aspirations. A tangible feeling of solidarity pulsed between them, yet beneath it lay the potential for fractures based on the unseen consequences of decisions yet to be made. Before either could reflect further, Greg's phone buzzed. Insistently again, pulling them both back to reality. It might be the company, he said, uncertainty creeping back in. Ethan realized that the moment had arrived for both of them not just to contemplate futures, but to act against their fears. He felt the butterflies of anticipation clash with the ghost of self-doubt within him. Will you answer? Ethan asked, the question rife with more significance than he intended. Greg squinted at the screen, the weight of impending revelation riding on his shoulders. In that quiet moment, both men stood on the precipice of change atop their vulnerabilities. Would they leap forward together or retreat into the safety of silence and fear? The phone buzzed again, demanding direction. Just as Ethan was about to venture into an expression of comfort, something deep within him urged for a confrontation instead. What if this is not just about you, Greg? What if this is about us taking accountability for our paths? As the tension hung thick, the trajectory of their partnership depended on the choices about to be made. Would this moment bind them or fracture their tentative connection? Ethan held his breath as Greg hovered over the phone, fingers trembling. The moment stretched like taffy, slow and agonizing. He recognized that this was more than just a phone call, it was a shift in their dynamic, a challenge to move from contemplation to action. You know, Ethan began, his voice threaded with urgency, every time we hesitate, we forfeit our chance to step into the versions of ourselves we're meant to be. Greg's shoulders tensed, his gaze locked onto the screen, wrestling with the expectation of what lay on the other side. But what if I fail again? He murmured, the vulnerability spilling into the space between them. That's the point, Ethan replied, feeling the weight of the conversation shift. Failure isn't a conclusion, it's part of the process. It's the lessons we never learn from success that have kept us stagnant. Just as Greg's mouth opened for a response, there was a chirp from the phone, snapping his attention back. The moment of truth had arrived. The screen lit up, revealing the company name, a beacon of potential that simultaneously flooded Greg's thoughts with dread. Do I look ready for this? Greg's question dripped with doubt but also a flicker of determination. Ethan took a moment, gathering his thoughts. They had been speaking in the abstract, but this was real. You're not just waiting for validation here. You're reaching for what you want, he said, forcing himself to meet Greg's gaze with unwavering confidence. That requires courage, and you have that. Just look at how you've embraced this conversation. The sincerity in Ethan's voice, layered with warmth and understanding, coaxed a shadow of a smile from Greg. His senses sharpened. Maybe acknowledgement of their fears could be a pathway through. Okay. The word out of Greg's mouth, laced with newfound resolve. As his thumb hovered above the call button, Ethan's heart raced, matching the pace of a coiled spring ready to release. Without breaking eye contact, Greg pressed the button. The phone connected with a soft click, and a composed voice greeted them from the other end. Hello, this is Allison from company. I'm glad we could connect today. Ethan's pulse quickened not just for Greg, but for himself. This was a pivotal instigation, breaching the silence of self-distrust he had harbored. He shifted in his seat, caught in the flickering moments of Greg's response, absorbing the interplay of excitement and anxiety that mirrored his internal struggle. Greg's voice was steady, but as he spoke about the interview, Ethan could observe the subtle shift. The anxious defense began to dissolve, revealing raw authenticity in Greg's words. Thank you for getting back to me. I wanted to follow up on our last conversation. As Greg spoke, Ethan found himself reflecting. Could he adapt this same courage in his own dealings? The corporate confrontation he had been dreading loomed like an unsolved puzzle in the back of his mind. Ethan. Greg's voice broke through his reverie, pulling him back. I'm here, Ethan replied, snapping to attention. Greg glanced at him, quietly grateful. I think I can do this. Greg's determination emerged like dawn breaking through a long night, illuminating shadows and fears. They exchanged looks that shared the burdens and ambitions both sought to navigate. But even within this small victory was the encompassing reality of uncertainty. Where would this conversation lead? As Greg ended the call, a sense of empowerment settled into the space. That felt good, he laughed nervously, the tension in his features loosening. But almost immediately, the familiar tightness crept back into his expression. Now what? Ethan swallowed, grasping the moment. Now, we confront our next challenges. I need to approach my own decisions, step outside my comfort zone. The acknowledgement of their burgeoning growth brought an electric pulse through the air. What if we tackle them together? Greg suggested, the hint of enthusiasm dancing behind his hesitation. Ethan nodded, impressed by the shift in Greg. Yes. But first, we need to lay the groundwork. We need to be clear about what we want. What does success look like for us? The conversation had shifted paths, moving from mere contemplation to actionable insights. Yet beneath each responded notion loomed an unspoken fear, an apprehension about exposing their ambitions in a world that didn't always welcome vulnerability. Greg's eyes darkened momentarily. What if we're still not enough? Then we redefine it, remember? Ethan countered with renewed firmness, feeling the tension coiling back around him. And maybe we'll discover we are more than enough. In that moment, an undercurrent of excitement surged between them, laced with the thrill of facing the unknown together. They were at a crossroads, choices awaited them, both personal and professional, each ripple effect holding endless possibilities. As they navigated this newfound territory, silence blanketed them momentarily, a space filled with thoughts yet unspoken. What further revelations lay ahead? Ethan wondered if the universe was preparing developments that might alter the trajectory of both their lives. In the silence, a nagging thought pulsed within Ethan: would confronting his own fears lead to a confrontation with an unexpected rival, one he didn't even see coming? The stakes were high, and the path ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty. Ethan stood at the door of what had been a turning point in his life, the memory of the gathering lingering in the air like the last breaths of summer. Today marked a new chapter, his first community discussion following the success of that initial meeting. The butterflies swirled in his stomach like a tempest. There was no turning back. It was time to embrace vulnerability as a genuine strength, not just for himself, but for those he would invite to share their stories. As he set the chairs in a circle, Ethan recalled the surge of confidence and fulfillment he had felt after Greg's breakthrough. Their journey had opened doors within him that once felt fortified by fear. With every sectional arrangement, he mentally replayed those elements of honesty and connection that had unified the group, realizing how much he craved to experience that collective warmth again. Only this time, he would lead it. Arriving early gave him a chance to go over his intentions, no longer shrouded in anxiety. Vulnerability creates communities, he muttered to himself, solidifying the mantra with each chair he placed. There was power in these words, layering meaning into this gathering that transcended individual trauma, weaving a tapestry of shared experience through unguarded conversations. When guests began to filter in, each friendly smile felt like an affirmation of his decision. Their presence ignited a spark of confidence in Ethan. They had come for connection, and he could provide that. "Welcome," he said, warmth in his tone as he addressed the small assembly. "Tonight is about sharing, about embracing our stories, however fragmented they may be." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling grounded in his purpose. He unfolded a few personal anecdotes, moments of unseen struggles buried beneath wealth, narrating how isolation had clawed at the fabric of his existence, causing him to feel disconnected even in rooms filled with laughter. As he spoke, he noticed the evolution of faces around him, nodding heads, flickers of understanding. The warmth grew thicker, as if weaving an invisible thread that pulled them all closer together. With every story shared, he felt less like a billionaire and more like someone who had once feared being seen. The roles had shifted, and vulnerability was being embraced. One mother from the group shared her fears of losing her identity amid the chaos of family. Her voice trembled but empowered, each word peeling back layers of solitude. "I feel I've lost myself in this role of caretaker," she admitted, tears shimmering in her eyes. Ethan felt a wave of empathy wash over him and realized that in listening, in welcoming others' stories, he was gifting them a platform to conquer their own isolation. Each shared experience became a catalyst for connection. It resonated deeply within him. Conversation was not merely about relaying facts but about crafting a space to breathe, to learn, to heal, not just for one but for many. As the night unraveled, he saw a palpable shift. The group became engaged in a dialogic exchange of heartfelt truths. Laughter mingled with tear-soaked confessions. There was no judgment, only a resounding acceptance of the complexities of their lives. Reflecting on the evolution of this evening, Ethan understood that he had transformed through the very act of facilitating the conversation. The man who once shrank back into shadows had blossomed beneath the welcoming lights of shared vulnerability. He recognized he was no longer driving to stifle his truth, he had instead learned to embrace it. When it was time to conclude, the applause echoed through the room, more profound than the sound of clapping. It was a celebration of bravery, a mutual acknowledgement of their pathways. "Let us continue to meet," he proposed, his voice steadier than ever. "Let us co-create spaces where silence is shattered and stories are welcomed." In that moment, as the crowd murmured in agreement, Ethan felt a transformation occurring deep within him. A solid confidence had emerged, one that he could trace back to the depths of his silence. He no longer saw himself merely as a mute billionaire. He was an anchor, a catalyst for others and their growth. As he locked eyes with Mia across the room, a warm smile blossomed on her face, reflecting the pride they both felt. Ethan had conquered his biggest fear not just by speaking, but by creating a sanctuary for others to share their truths. And so, with every hug exchanged and every eye glistening with understanding, Ethan knew he had achieved an authentic personal revolution. He had proved to himself that success transcended monetary value. It was about fostering connections, empowering others, and nurturing genuine relationships. This was not just a moment, it was the dawning of a relentless journey toward establishing a legacy built on connection and understanding, thus redefining what it meant to be enough in both their individual lives and within a community. If you haven't yet, now is the time to immerse yourself in these transformative journeys. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss any of our exclusive, emotional stories. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and keep this content flowing. Comment below with your reactions and thoughts about this epic conclusion. We want to hear from you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful interpretation of overcoming. Don't wait even one more second to support this channel and ensure more stories of empowerment keep coming.